The incident, which would soon ignite a firestorm of online outrage and become a stark case study in racial profiling, began on a deceptively quiet Saturday morning in an upscale suburban Virginia neighborhood. The air was still cool, and the only sound were the chirping of birds and the distant hum of a lawnmower. It was in this placid setting that Tanya Harris, a 32-year-old cardiac nurse, finally reached her car after a grueling 12-hour night shift. Her body ached with fatigue, her scrubs were faintly stained with the evidence of a long night, and her hands were full, a lukewarm coffee in one hand, a bag of groceries in the other. All she could think about was getting home, just a few feet away, and collapsing into bed. Her sanctuary was a silver Tesla parked directly in front of her own townhouse, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. As she fumbled for her keys, a prickle of unease made her look up. A woman, whom Tanya vaguely recognized from HOA meetings, was standing a dozen yards away, arms crossed, her gaze fixed and unblinking. That woman was Deborah Simmons, a figure so archetypal residents had privately dubbed her HOA Karen. She was a self-appointed guardian of the neighborhood's covenant, a woman who wielded her HOA rulebook like a sacred text. Her passions were the precise height of fence pickets, the militant uniformity of lawn length, and the swift reporting of any trash cans left curbside past 5 p.m. She knew everyone, and more importantly, she knew who, in her estimation, belonged. As Tanya's key fob chirped and the Tesla's door handles presented themselves, Deborah marched over with a purpose that brooked no argument. Her phone was already clutched in her hand, a weapon at the ready. "Excuse me." Deborah's voice was a sharp crack in the morning calm, devoid of courtesy. "What do you think you're doing with that car?" Tanya, her mind foggy with exhaustion, blinked slowly. The question was so absurd it barely registered. Getting in it?" she replied, her tone a mixture of confusion and weariness. Deborah's lips pursed into a thin, disapproving line. She scanned Tanya from head to toe, taking in her scrubs, her tired eyes, the simple grocery bag. "That's not your car," she stated, her voice dripping with certainty. "I know who lives in this unit, and you do not live here. You don't belong here." The implication, laced with a toxic blend of assumption and prejudice, began to cut through Tanya's fatigue. A cold knot tightened in her stomach. "I do live here," she said, her voice gaining a steely edge. She gestured with her coffee cup toward the townhouse's front door. "That's my house. And this," she nodded at the Tesla, "is my car. I have the registration and the keys to prove it." But Deborah Simmons had already constructed her narrative. A black woman, even one in medical scrubs, could not possibly own a nice car in a nice neighborhood. In her world, such a scenario was an anomaly, a breach of the natural order that needed correcting. "No," Deborah said, shaking her head with finality that was both infuriating and frightening. "I've seen this Tesla parked here for weeks. It belongs to the homeowner, and you're clearly not her. I'm not going to stand here and let you steal a car in broad daylight. I'm calling the police." And without another moment of hesitation, she did. Tanya stood frozen, a spectacle for her own neighbors, forced to wait on the sidewalk in front of her own home as Deborah Simmons, with performative indignation, detailed a suspicious activity to a 911 dispatcher. The quiet morning was now shattered, the sanctity of Tanya's hard-won home violated not by a criminal, but by a woman whose weapon was a phone, and whose ammunition was a deeply ingrained bias. The stage was set for a confrontation that was about to become far bigger than either of them could have imagined. The arrival of the police cars, their red and blue lights strobing silently against the manicured lawns and neutral-toned townhouse facades, transformed a private humiliation into a public spectacle. For Tanya Harris, the wail of the sirens was a gut punch. Each flash a reminder that her presence in her own space was being criminalized. She stood her ground, hands planted firmly on her hips, her scrubs feeling less like a uniform of care and more like a target. She took a deep, steadying breath, drawing on the same reservoir calm she used to talk down anxious patients in the ICU. Neighbors, drawn by the commotion, peered from behind blinds and cracked open doors, their faces a blur of curiosity and judgment. Two officers emerged from their vehicles, their expressions professionally neutral. The senior of the two, a man with a weary but kind face, approached Tanya first. "Ma'am," he began, his voice level, "we received a call about a possible auto theft. Can you confirm this is your vehicle?" Before Tanya could even form a word, Deborah Simmons interjected, her voice shrill with self-righteous certainty. "She's trying to break in. I saw the whole thing." Tanya ignored her, maintaining eye contact with the officer. "Yes, this is my car." She pulled the key card from her pocket and pressed it against the Tesla's B pillar. The vehicle responded with a friendly chirp, its lights blinking in welcome, the doors unlocking. It was a simple, technological confirmation of ownership, but Deborah was undeterred. She crossed her arms, a fortress of misplaced conviction. Anyone can steal one of those cards. That proves nothing. Check the registration. I'm telling you, I know this neighborhood, and she does not live here. A profound weariness washed over Tanya, heavier than any fatigue from her shift. It was the exhaustion of having to constantly prove her right to exist in spaces people like Deborah assumed were theirs alone. With a quiet sigh, she opened the car door, leaned in, and retrieved the vehicle's registration from the glove compartment. She then handed it, along with her driver's license, to the officer. Both documents, crisp and official, listed the same address, the very townhouse they were standing in front of. The officer compared the two, his eyes flicking from the documents to Tanya, then to Deborah. He handed them back to Tanya. "Everything checks out, ma'am. Sorry for the inconvenience." He then turned to Deborah, his demeanor shifting from neutral to stern. "Ma'am, this is her vehicle and her residence. The matter is closed." For a moment, it seemed the absurd drama was over, but the public exposure had only cemented Deborah's resolve. Her face flushed a blotchy red. "That's impossible," she sputtered, her voice rising an octave. "The HOA records show this home belongs to a T. Harris's. She's clearly lying about who she is. She must have forged those documents." It was then that Tanya smiled. It wasn't a smile of anger or even triumph, but one of profound, almost pitying clarity. The final, damning piece of the puzzle had been handed to her. She said softly, her voice cutting through Deborah's hysteria with chilling calm, "You're right. It does belong to T. Harris." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "That's me, Tanya Harris, the homeowner, the woman you just called the police on." The officers, their patience clearly spent, offered a final, terse apology to Tanya before returning to their cars and driving off, leaving the two women alone in the suddenly quiet street. The spectacle was over, but the confrontation was not. Humiliated and seething, Deborah took a step closer, her finger jabbing the air between them. The sting of Deborah's final threat, "I'm taking this up with the HOA," did not, as perhaps expected, provoke a public confrontation or a fiery social media post. For Tanya Harris, a woman who made life-or-death decisions in the high-stakes environment of a cardiac unit, raw emotion was a luxury she couldn't afford. Instead of reacting, she strategized. A quiet, formidable resolve settled over her. She went quiet, and in that silence, she began her work. For 2 weeks, Tanya became a student of her own neighborhood. She pored over the HOA's bylaws, studied its financial disclosures, and mapped its power structure. She discovered that the community safety chair position, a role Deborah had long coveted but never secured, was vacant. It was a perfect conduit for her plan. She drafted a professional letter of interest, highlighting her skills in documentation, procedure, and conflict resolution, all honed in the medical field. She secured references from respected neighbors who were as weary of Deborah's reign of terror as she was. Her application was a masterclass in quiet, determined competence. The night of the next HOA meeting arrived. While other residents filed in wearing casual weekend attire, Tanya entered the community clubhouse wearing a sharp, tailored business suit, her posture radiating an authority that her scrubs had often concealed. In her hand was a thick, meticulously organized leather-bound folder. The murmur of conversation dipped as she walked in. Deborah Simmons, already seated at the front with her own notepad, looked up, her jaw went slack, her eyes widening in pure, unadulterated shock. "What are you doing here?" Deborah snapped, the words escaping before she could filter them. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to the exchange. Tanya offered a polite, cool smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes. "Oh, I'm here as a new member of the HOA board." Deborah blinked, shaking her head as if to clear a malfunction. "That's impossible. There was no election. The board hasn't approved any new members." The HOA president, Mr. Davison, a pragmatic man who had grown tired of Deborah's constant drama, cleared his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Simmons, the bylaws allow for the appointment of vacant positions. Ms. Harris applied for the open community safety chair role. Her credentials were impeccable, and she was unanimously approved by the existing board last week." The color drained from Deborah's face. Community safety chair. The title hung in the air, a seismic shift in the neighborhood's power dynamic. The hunter had just been placed in charge of the preserve. Tanya did not waste her new authority. Over the next few weeks, she immersed herself in the board's inner workings. With the official password, she accessed years of archive reports and, most crucially, the live and historical feeds from the community security cameras. What she discovered, methodically cross-referencing incident reports with video footage, made her own jaw drop in disbelief. It wasn't just about her. Deborah had been a one-woman crime stopper against non-existent crime, filing a pattern of false reports that were both systematic and discriminatory. A Latino family having a barbecue in their own backyard had been reported for trespassing and loud, disorderly conduct. A young South Asian couple unloading groceries from their new car were flagged for suspicious loitering and potential casing of properties. In every single case, the time-stamped security footage irrefutably proved the residents were on their own property, going about their lawful business. Deborah's vigilance was a thinly veiled campaign of racial harassment. Tanya's medical training kicked in. She compiled the evidence like a patient's chart. She gathered every falsified report, aligned each with corresponding video stills that proved their falsehood, and created a damning, undeniable timeline of malicious intent. She documented it all with a calm, forensic detachment. Then, when the dossier was complete, she called for a special session of the HOA board, citing a matter of urgent community safety and fiduciary responsibility. She knew that Deborah's actions weren't just morally repugnant. They opened the entire HOA to massive legal liability. The real meeting was about to begin. The air in the HOA meeting room was thick, with a palpable electric tension. It was standing room only. Residents filled every chair, lined the walls, and spilled out into the hallway. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a current. Word spread like wildfire through group texts and backyard fences. Something big was happening. Everyone had their own story about Deborah Simmons, and now they had gathered to witness what they hoped would be a long overdue reckoning. At the front of the room, Tanya Harris stood beside a projector screen, a picture of serene composure. The sharp business suit was her armor, and the thick folder on the table before her was her arsenal. She waited for the president to call the meeting to order before she began, her voice clear and steady, devoid of malice but brimming with purpose. "Thank you all for coming," she started. "As your new community safety chair, I've conducted a routine review of all incident reports and complaints filed over the past 18 months. What I found necessitates this special meeting." She clicked the remote. The screen behind her lit up, displaying a meticulously organized chart. On one side were copies of emails and formal complaints filed by Deborah Simmons. On the other, corresponding clips from the community security cameras. The first pair showed a complaint about suspicious loitering from a man named Mr. Alvarez. The video clip showed him simply waiting on his own front steps for his daughter to be dropped off from school. A murmur ran through the crowd. Click. Another complaint. Possible trespassing and disorderly conduct involving the Patel family. The video showed them laughing, carrying bags of groceries from their car into their own garage. Click. A report of aggressive dog walking. The footage revealed a young black woman, Ms. Evans, jogging peacefully with her leash terrier. With each click of the remote, a new, damning juxtaposition appeared. The gasps in the room grew louder, coalescing into a wave of shared outrage. Deborah Simmons, who had been staring daggers at Tanya from her seat, suddenly shot to her feet. "That's private information. You can't just show that," she sputtered, her face flushing a deep, blotchy crimson. "This is an invasion of my privacy." Tanya turned slowly, her gaze cool and unwavering. Actually, Mrs. Simmons, as a duly appointed safety chair, I am fully authorized to review all HOA complaints and related security footage to ensure the legitimate safety of our community. She paused, letting the legalistic language underscore her authority. And what I have documented is not a pattern of community service, but a pattern of targeted harassment against your own neighbors. The room fell utterly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Tanya continued, her voice softening slightly but losing none of its power. She finally brought up the file from her own incident. A still image from a neighbor's doorbell camera showed her, in her scrubs, standing by her Tesla, while Deborah spoke animatedly to the police. You accuse me of stealing my own car, in front of my own home, in front of all of you, she said, making eye contact with the crowd. You called the police on me for the crime of being tired after night shift and trying to enter my own vehicle. And as we've all just seen, you have done the same, over and over again, to other people in this neighborhood. This was never about safety. It was always about prejudice. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the shifting of weight and the slow, dawning realization on dozens of faces. The HOA president, Mr. Davison, stood up, his expression grave. He didn't need to confer with the other board members. The evidence was irrefutable. Deborah Simmons, he said, his voice firm and carrying to every corner of the room. The board has reviewed this evidence. Your actions represent a profound breach of trust, a misuse of HOA resources, and have created a significant liability for this community. Effective immediately, you are removed from your position on the social committee and are hereby barred from holding any HOA office indefinitely. For a moment, there was stunned silence, and then the room erupted in a wave of applause. It wasn't celebratory. It was cathartic, a release of years of pent-up frustration. Deborah snatched her purse from the floor, her chair screeching against the tile. This is outrageous. You'll be hearing from my lawyer, she hissed, her voice trembling with rage. This is just cancel culture. But her words were swallowed by the crowd. She stormed out, a solitary figure of deflated fury. As the door swung shut behind her, the atmosphere in the room changed. The tension dissipated, replaced by a sense of collective relief. The truth, presented with cold, hard facts, had finally spoken. And everyone could see that the neighborhood's self-appointed tyrant had been dethroned, not by a shout, but by a spreadsheet, not by an argument, but by evidence. They were finally done. 3 weeks later, the neighborhood underwent a quiet but profound transformation. The air itself felt lighter, cleansed of the constant, low-grade anxiety that Deborah Simmons's watchful presence had fostered. Lawns were no longer just measured plots of grass, but places where neighbors would stop and chat. Children's laughter seemed to ring a little louder, and the sound of barbecues firing up on weekends became a common, welcome chorus. People smiled more, not just polite nods, but genuine greetings. The culmination was a block party, the first in nearly a decade, where the scent of grilled food mingled with the sound of music and easy conversation. The community, once a collection of isolated properties, was becoming a neighborhood again. Tanya, from her official position on the HOA board, channeled this newfound energy into something lasting. She formally disbanded the old, complaint-driven safety committee and launched the Neighborhood Unity program. Its first event was a simple welcome to block coffee morning for new residents, ensuring they were met with a friendly face and a muffin, not a suspicious glare. She organized a community directory for local babysitters and pet sitters, and a tool lending library in someone's garage. The program's guiding principle was simple. Connection is the best defense against conflict. As for Deborah, her presence faded like a bad memory. The for sale sign appeared on her lawn within a month, and the move was conducted with a hushed efficiency. The reign of the HOA Karen was over. On a crisp Saturday morning, Tanya was pulling out her driveway when she saw Deborah one last time. She was loading the final, tape-shut boxes into a luxury SUV, her movements sharp with resentment. Their eyes met across the quiet street. Deborah straightened up, her face a mask of bitter defeat. "Well," she said, her voice carrying the weight of her humiliation, "you got what you wanted. You won." Tanya turned off her car and got out, not to gloat, but to offer a sense of closure. She smiled a gentle, sincere expression that held no trace of victory. "No," Tanya replied, her voice calm and clear. "I didn't get what I wanted. What I wanted was to come home from a double shift and get into my own car without being accused of a crime. What I wanted was to feel safe and welcome in my own community." She paused, looking around at the peaceful street, where a man across the way waved at her before continuing to water his flowers. What we all got was what we needed all along: peace. Deborah had no retort. She simply shook her head, slammed her car door shut, and drove away, leaving the neighborhood for good. Tanya got back into her Tesla, the car that had started it all, and drove away. This time, there was no one to question her, no one to stare, no one to doubt her right to be there.